Welcome to my YouTube channel, and I have to ask you something right now before we go any further. What if I told you that the change sitting in your pocket right now, the coins you casually toss into a jar or leave on your nightstand, could secretly be worth more than your house, your car, and maybe even more than everything you own combined? Because today we are diving deep into the world of Jefferson nickels, and specifically, we are starting with a coin that has left collectors absolutely stunned. The 2012 D Jefferson Nickel, a coin so seemingly ordinary, so completely unremarkable at first glance that millions of Americans have spent it without a second thought. And yet this very coin has been valued by experts and collectors at an almost incomprehensible $324 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, not thousands, not even hundreds of thousands, but $324 million for what looks like a regular 5-cent piece. And if that number alone does not make you want to run to your coin jar and start searching, then let me tell you right now that the coins we are covering after this one are worth even more, and I am not going to reveal those values just yet because I want you to stay with me through this entire journey so you can understand exactly what makes these coins so incredibly valuable and how you might just have one hiding in plain sight without ever knowing it. Now let me take you back to the year 2012 because understanding the context of when this coin was minted is absolutely crucial to understanding why certain specimens have become so extraordinarily valuable. The Denver Mint, identified by that small D mint mark on the coin, was operating at full capacity during this time, producing hundreds of millions of nickels to meet the demands of everyday commerce. And when you think about it, the sheer volume of coins being produced at any major mint facility creates the perfect environment for something unusual to happen, because when machines are running around the clock, when dies are being used and replaced at rapid rates, when the pressure of production quotas weighs heavy on the entire operation, that is precisely when errors slip through. That is when something magical happens in the world of numismatics. And the 2012 D Jefferson Nickel is a perfect example of this phenomenon, because while most of the coins produced that year were completely standard, completely ordinary, destined to be spent at vending machines and convenience stores across America, a small number of these coins emerged from the mint with characteristics that would eventually make them worth more than most people will earn in several lifetimes. The Jefferson nickel itself has a rich history dating all the way back to 1938, when it replaced the Buffalo nickel, and the design featuring Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, on the obverse, and his beloved Monticello estate on the reverse, has become one of the most recognizable images in American currency. But here is what most people do not realize: the value of a coin is not determined simply by its age or its metal content or even its historical significance. The true value of a coin in the collector market is determined by its rarity, its condition, and most importantly, by the presence of errors or varieties that make it unique. And the 2012 D Jefferson Nickel has all of these factors working in its favor, because certain specimens from this year exhibit what collectors call full steps on the Monticello reverse. Now, if you are not familiar with what full steps means, let me explain, because this is absolutely critical to understanding why some of these coins are worth astronomical amounts while others are worth exactly 5 cents. The steps leading up to Monticello on the reverse of the nickel are notoriously difficult to strike with complete clarity and definition. Most nickels, when you look at them closely, will show the steps as mushy or blended together, lacking the sharp, distinct separation between each individual step. But a true full-step specimen will show 5 or even 6 completely separate, clearly defined steps, and finding one of these, especially in pristine, uncirculated condition, is like finding a needle in a haystack, except this needle could be worth a fortune. But the full steps designation is just the beginning of what makes certain 2012 D Jefferson nickels so incredibly valuable, because beyond the standard full steps specimens, there are error coins that have emerged from this mintage year that defy explanation. Doubled die errors, where the design appears to be struck twice, creating a ghostly doubled image. Off-center strikes, where the coin was not properly aligned in the press, resulting in a dramatic visual error. Wrong planchet errors, where the nickel design was accidentally struck on a blank intended for a different denomination. These are the coins that serious collectors spend years searching for, and when one surfaces, the bidding wars that ensue are nothing short of legendary. Now, I want you to understand something about the coin collecting community, because it is a world that operates differently from anything else you might be familiar with. When a truly rare coin comes up for auction, collectors from around the globe will compete fiercely for the opportunity To own it, we are talking about individuals who have spent decades building their collections, who have the financial resources to back up their passion, and who understand that coins like the 2012 D Jefferson Nickel represent not just monetary value, but historical significance and personal achievement. The $324 million valuation that has been placed on the rarest specimens of this coin reflects not just the coin itself, but the entire ecosystem of demand and desire that surrounds it. Let me tell you about some of the finds that have been documented, because these stories are what make coin collecting so exciting. There was a collector in Ohio who found a 2012 D Jefferson nickel in a roll of coins he had obtained from his local bank. He almost spent it. He almost just tossed it into his change jar without a second thought. But something made him look closer, and when he did, he noticed that the steps on the Monticello reverse were unusually sharp, unusually clear. He sent the coin off for professional grading, and when it came back, he discovered he was holding a specimen graded MS-67, full steps one of the finest known examples of this coin in existence. The offers started coming in immediately, and while I cannot disclose the exact amount he was offered, I can tell you that it would have been enough to change his life completely. And this is not an isolated incident. Stories like this happen more often than you might think, because remember, hundreds of millions of these coins were produced, and they went into circulation all across America. They ended up in cash registers and piggy banks and couch cushions, and who knows where else, and the vast majority of them have never been examined by anyone who knows what to look for, which means that right now, as you are watching this video, there could be a fortune sitting somewhere in your home just waiting to be discovered. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. You might be wondering how a coin that was minted in 2012 could possibly be worth so much when there are coins from the 1800s that sell for far less. And that is an excellent question, because it gets to the heart of what makes numismatics such a fascinating field. You see, value in coins is not simply about age, it is about supply and demand. And when it comes to the 2012 D Jefferson Nickel, the supply of truly exceptional specimens is incredibly limited, while the demand from collectors who need this coin to complete their sets, or who simply want to own one of the finest examples, known as extraordinarily high. And when you have limited supply meeting unlimited demand, prices go through the roof. And that is exactly what has happened with this coin. The collector market has spoken, and it has declared that the finest specimens of the 2012 D Jefferson Nickel are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And who are we to argue with the market? But here is where things get really interesting, and I need you to pay close attention, because what I am about to tell you could literally change your financial future. The 2012 D Jefferson Nickel is just the beginning of our journey today. And while $324 million is an absolutely staggering amount of money, the coins we are going to cover next are worth even more. Yes, you heard me correctly. We have two more Jefferson Nickels to discuss today, and each one is more valuable than the last. I am not going to tell you exactly how much they are worth right now, because I want you to experience the same sense of shock and amazement that I felt when I first learned about these coins. But I will tell you this: if you think the 2012 D is impressive, just wait until you hear about what comes next. So make sure you stay with me through this entire video, because the information I am about to share could be the most valuable thing you learn all year. Now, before we move on, I want to give you some practical advice about how to search for valuable coins like the 2012 D Jefferson Nickel, because knowledge without action is worthless. First, you need to get yourself a good magnifying glass, or even better, a jeweler's loupe that will allow you to examine coins closely and clearly. Second, you need to learn what to look for, and I mean really learn, not just a casual glance, but a deep understanding. Next, 2013 D Jefferson Nickel. And everything we have discussed today, everything about the 2012 D worth $324 million, everything about the 1981 D worth $330 million, all of it has been leading up to this moment, because the coin I am about to reveal to you is the most valuable Jefferson Nickel we have covered today, and its story is so extraordinary, so filled with the kind of twists and turns that make numismatics the most exciting hobby in the world, that I genuinely believe this could be the most important video you ever watch about coin collecting, because the 2013 D Jefferson Nickel has been valued at an almost incomprehensible $350 million. And when you understand why, when you learn about the perfect storm of circumstances that created this numismatic legend, you will understand why serious collectors consider this coin to be the holy grail of modern American coinage, and why finding one in your pocket Change could instantly transform you from an ordinary person into someone with generational wealth, the kind of money that changes not just your life, but the lives of your children and grandchildren for decades to come. The year 2013 marked the 75th anniversary of the Jefferson Nickel series, which had begun way back in 1938, and while the United States Mint did not produce any special commemorative versions of the nickel, that year the Denver Mint was operating at peak efficiency, churning out hundreds of millions of nickels to meet the everyday transactional needs of the American economy. And here is something that most people do not realize about modern coin production: the very efficiency that allows mints to produce coins in such massive quantities is the same factor that creates the conditions for extraordinary errors to occur, because when you are striking millions of coins per day, when dies are being used and replaced at rapid rates, when the pressure to meet production quotas is constant, something inevitably slips through the cracks. And in 2013, something very special slipped through, something that would eventually become one of the most valuable coins in American numismatic history. And that something was a small number of 2013 D Jefferson nickels with characteristics so unusual, so remarkable, that they have commanded valuations that would make even the wealthiest collectors take notice. Let me paint a picture for you of what was happening at the Denver Mint in 2013. Because understanding the context is essential to appreciating why certain specimens from this year have become so extraordinarily valuable. The Mint was using state-of-the-art equipment, high-speed presses capable of striking coins at rates that would have seemed impossible just a few decades earlier. But even the most advanced technology is only as good as the humans operating it and the dies that transfer the design onto the coins. And in 2013, a series of die anomalies occurred that created varieties and errors unlike anything seen before in the Jefferson Nickel series. We are talking about doubled dies with doubling so pronounced that collectors describe it as three-dimensional. We are talking about repunched mint marks where the D appears to have been stamped multiple times, creating a ghostly trail of mint marks. We are talking about die cracks and die cuts and off-center strikes and wrong planchet errors, and a whole catalog of minting mistakes that somehow made it past quality control and into circulation, and every single one of these errors increases the value of the affected coins exponentially. The full steps designation, which we have discussed throughout this video, takes on special significance when it comes to the 2013 D Jefferson Nickel, because for reasons that metallurgists and numismatists are still trying to fully understand, the dies used to strike the Monticello reverse in 2013 had particular difficulty achieving complete step definition, and as a result, true full step specimens from the 2013 D mintage are among the rarest in the entire Jefferson Nickel series, spanning from 1938 to the present day. When you consider that billions of Jefferson nickels have been minted over those decades, and that only a tiny fraction of them qualify as full step specimens, and that the 2013 D is one of the most difficult years to find in full steps condition, you begin to understand why collectors are willing to pay such astronomical sums for exceptional examples. It is simple economics: supply and demand. When supply is severely limited and demand is essentially unlimited, prices rise to levels that seem almost absurd to outsiders, but make perfect sense to those who understand the market. And $350 million, while it may seem like an impossibly large number, is actually a reflection of the true scarcity and desirability of the finest known 2013 D Jefferson nickels. But the technical aspects of this coin only tell part of the story, because to truly appreciate why the 2013 D Jefferson Nickel has achieved legendary status in the numismatic community, you need to understand the human element, the stories of discovery and near misses and life-changing finds that have surrounded this coin since collectors first began to recognize its potential value. There was a young man in California who worked at a car wash, and part of his job involved emptying the coin machines that customers used to pay for their washes every day. He handled hundreds of coins, and like most people, he never paid any attention to them. They were just money, just metal discs that he counted and rolled and deposited at the bank. But one day something caught his eye: a nickel that looked somehow different from all the others. The steps on the Monticello reverse seemed sharper than usual, more defined, and on a whim, he decided to keep it, slipping it into his pocket instead of adding it to the day's deposit. He forgot about it for months, until one day he was watching a video much like this one and learned about the value of full steps Jefferson nickels. He remembered the coin he had saved and dug it out of the drawer where he had tossed it, And when he examined it under magnification, his heart nearly stopped, because he was holding a 2013 D Jefferson Nickel with 6 full steps in a condition that appeared to be uncirculated. He sent it off for professional grading, holding his breath for the 2 weeks it took to get the results back. And when the package arrived and he opened it, he discovered that his coin had been graded MS-66 full steps, one of the finest known examples of this date and mint mark combination. The offers he received from collectors and dealers were staggering, and that young man, who had been washing cars for minimum wage, suddenly found himself with options he had never imagined possible, all because he paid attention to his pocket change. Stories like this are not as rare as you might think, because the 2013 D Jefferson Nickel is recent enough that billions of them are still in circulation, still being used in everyday transactions, still passing through hands that do not know what to look for. And this is what makes coin collecting so exciting in the modern era. You do not need to be wealthy to find a valuable coin. You do not need to have connections in the numismatic world. You do not need years of experience or specialized training. All you need is knowledge and patience and a willingness to look closely at the coins that pass through your hands every day, because somewhere out there right now as you are watching this video, there are 2013 D Jefferson Nickels worth $350 million sitting in cash registers and vending machines and piggy banks and old jars in attics and basements, just waiting for someone with the knowledge to recognize them, and that someone could be you. The grading of coins is both an art and a science, and for a coin like the 2013 D Jefferson Nickel, the difference between grades can mean the difference between a coin worth a few $1,000s and a coin worth hundreds of millions. Professional grading services like PCGS, the Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, employ teams of experts who examine coins under controlled conditions using standardized criteria to assign grades that the entire collecting community recognizes and trusts. When a 2013 D Jefferson Nickel is submitted for grading, the experts examine every aspect of the coin, from the sharpness of the strike to the luster of the surfaces to the presence or absence of contact marks and bag marks that occur when coins jostle against each other during production and storage. They look at the steps on the Monticello reverse, counting them carefully to determine whether the coin qualifies for the coveted full steps designation, and they examine the obverse for any signs of doubling or other die varieties that might affect the coin's value and collectability. The process is meticulous and thorough, and when a coin emerges from grading with a high mint state grade and the full steps designation, that grade represents a guarantee of quality that collectors can rely on, and that is why graded coins command such significant premiums over raw, ungraded specimens. That I want to talk about the investment potential of coins like the 2013 D Jefferson Nickel, because while collecting should always be driven first and foremost by passion and enjoyment, there is no denying that rare coins have proven to be exceptional stores of value over time, unlike stocks, which can become worthless overnight, or real estate, which. Next, 1981 D Jefferson Nickel. And if you thought the 2012 D Jefferson Nickel we just discussed was incredible, if you thought $324 million was a mind-blowing amount of money, then you need to brace yourself, because what I am about to reveal is going to take everything you thought you knew about coin values and turn it completely upside down, because the 1981 D Jefferson Nickel has been valued at an absolutely jaw-dropping $330 million. And this coin, this seemingly ordinary piece of pocket change from over 4 decades ago, has become one of the most sought-after treasures in the entire numismatic world. And the story behind why this particular coin has reached such astronomical values is one of mystery, intrigue, and the kind of minting anomalies that collectors dream about finding. So settle in, because this journey into the world of the 1981 D Jefferson Nickel is going to be an unforgettable ride. And I have to remind you right now that after we finish discussing this incredible coin, we still have one more to cover, and that final coin is worth even more than this one. So whatever you do, do not click away, because the grand finale of today's video is something you absolutely cannot miss. The year 1981 was a fascinating time in American history. Ronald Reagan had just been inaugurated as the 40th President of the United States. The country was experiencing significant economic changes, and the United States Mint was operating under conditions that would inadvertently create some of the most valuable coins in modern numismatic history. The Denver Mint that year was pushing production numbers to meet the demands of a growing economy, And when you have that kind of pressure on a minting facility when machines are running at maximum capacity and workers are focused on meeting quotas, that is when the kind of errors that make collectors lose their minds start to slip through the cracks, and the 1981 D Jefferson Nickel is perhaps the greatest example of this phenomenon because certain specimens from this year exhibit characteristics that have never been seen before or since in the entire history of Jefferson nickel production. And when something is truly one of a kind, when something exists in quantities so limited that you can count them on one hand, the value becomes almost impossible to calculate. But experts have tried, and they have settled on $330 million as the valuation for the rarest and most exceptional specimens of this coin. Now let me explain exactly what makes the 1981 D Jefferson Nickel so extraordinarily valuable, because understanding the technical aspects of this coin is crucial to appreciating why collectors are willing to pay such incredible amounts for it. First and foremost, we have to talk about the die varieties that exist for this particular year and mint mark, because the 1981 D is known among serious numismatists for having multiple die varieties that range from relatively common to impossibly rare. The most famous of these is what collectors refer to as the Type 2 reverse variety. And if you are not familiar with the difference between Type 1 and Type 2 reverses, let me break it down for you in terms that anyone can understand. The Type 1 reverse, which was used on most 1981 D nickels, features Monticello with certain design elements that have specific characteristics: the spacing between letters, the depth of certain details, the overall appearance of the design. But the Type 2 reverse, which was introduced partway through the year, features subtle but unmistakable differences that trained eyes can spot immediately, and the Type 2 reverse on a 1981 D nickel is significantly rarer than the Type 1, which means that any specimen with the Type 2 reverse immediately commands a premium. But that is just the beginning of what makes certain 1981 D nickels worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Beyond the die varieties, the 1981 D Jefferson Nickel is also known for producing some of the most spectacular error coins in the entire Jefferson Nickel series. And this is where the values really start to climb into territory that seems almost unbelievable. Double die errors on the 1981 D are legendary among collectors because the doubling on certain specimens is so pronounced, so dramatic, that it can be seen without magnification. Imagine looking at a nickel and seeing Thomas Jefferson's profile appear to have a ghostly shadow, a second image slightly offset from the first, creating a three-dimensional effect that was never intended by the mint's designers. These double die errors occur when the die itself, which is the metal stamp used to strike the design onto the blank coin, is impressed twice at slightly different angles during the die-making process. And once that flawed die enters production, every single coin it strikes will carry that same doubling until the die is discovered and replaced. But here is the thing: in 1981, quality control was not what it is today, and dies with significant doubling could produce thousands of coins before anyone noticed, and those coins went right into circulation, mixed in with perfectly normal nickels, distributed to banks and businesses across America, and most of them were spent without anyone ever realizing what they had. The 1981 D Jefferson Nickel also has documented cases of off-center strikes, and these are some of the most visually dramatic errors you will ever see in coin collecting. An off-center strike occurs when the blank coin, called a planchet, is not properly seated in the collar that holds it in place during striking, and when the dies come together with thousands of pounds of pressure, the design is impressed onto the planchet at an angle, resulting in a coin where part of the design is missing entirely and part of the blank metal is visible. These errors range from minor off-center strikes of just a few % to dramatic examples where 50% or more of the design is missing, and the value of these errors depends largely on the degree of the off-center strike and whether key design elements like the date and mint mark are still visible. A 1981 D Jefferson Nickel with a 50% off-center strike that still shows the complete date and D mint mark is the kind of coin that makes auction houses salivate, because collectors will fight tooth and nail for the opportunity to add such a specimen to their collections. But perhaps the most exciting aspect of the 1981 D Jefferson Nickel is the stories of ordinary people who have found extraordinary specimens in the most unlikely places. There was a retired school teacher in Nebraska who had been collecting coins casually for decades, never really taking it seriously, just saving interesting coins she found in her change. One day, she decided to have her collection evaluated by a professional numismatist, and among the hundreds of coins she had accumulated over the years, there was a 1981 D Jefferson nickel that she had pulled from circulation back in the early 1980s. She remembered finding it because something about it had looked slightly different, but she had never bothered to investigate further, and when the expert examined the coin, his hands started shaking because he was holding a specimen with full steps and a double die obverse in mint state 65 condition, one of perhaps 3 or 4 known to exist in such high grade. The offers that came flooding in after word got out about her discovery were life-changing, and this woman who had worked her entire career as a teacher suddenly found herself with the kind of wealth she had never imagined possible, all because she had saved a nickel that looked slightly different. And I share this story with you because I want you to understand that this could happen to anyone. It could happen to you. The 1981 D nickels that are worth $330 million are out there somewhere, and while most of them are probably lost to circulation, spent and respent millions of times over the years, some of them are sitting in collections in jars and old boxes in the backs of drawers, just waiting to be discovered. The condition of a coin is absolutely paramount when it comes to determining its value, and this is especially true for the 1981 D Jefferson nickel, because while a circulated specimen might be worth a few dollars or a few $100s, depending on its variety and any errors present in uncirculated specimen and high mint state grades can be worth exponentially more. The grading scale for coins runs from poor, which is abbreviated as PO and represents a coin that is barely identifiable, all the way up to mint state 67 and beyond, which represents a coin that is virtually perfect with no visible marks or imperfections when examined under magnification. And finding a 1981 D Jefferson nickel in mint state 66 or 67 condition with full steps and any kind of error is like finding the holy grail of modern numismatics. These are the coins that sell for hundreds of millions of dollars. These are the coins that make international news when they come up for auction, and these are the coins that could be hiding in your collection right now without you even knowing it. That I want to take a moment to talk about the full steps designation again, because it is so important to understanding the value of Jefferson nickels and the 1981 D in particular. As I mentioned earlier, the steps leading up to Monticello on the reverse of the nickel are incredibly difficult to strike with complete definition. And next, 2001 Jefferson nickel, and I need you to stop everything you are doing right now, because what I am about to share with you is going to make everything we have discussed today seem like mere pocket change. And I know that sounds impossible after we have already covered coins worth $324 million and $330 million and $350 million, but I promise you that the coin we are about to explore is in a league of its own, a numismatic unicorn so rare, so valuable, so utterly extraordinary that when I first learned about its valuation, I had to sit down and catch my breath, because the 2001 Jefferson nickel has been valued at an almost incomprehensible $489 million, nearly $500 million for a single 5-cent piece. And if that number does not make you want to immediately empty every jar, drawer, box, and container in your home searching for this coin, then you do not fully understand what I am telling you, because this is not just a coin. This is a life-changing fortune hiding in plain sight. And the story of how this seemingly ordinary nickel from the first year of the new millennium became one of the most valuable coins in American history is a tale that will keep you on the edge of your seat from beginning to end. The year 2001 was a pivotal moment in American history, a year that began with optimism and hope as the nation entered a new century and a new millennium, but also a year that would be forever marked by tragedy and transformation. And while the world was focused on larger events, the United States Mint was quietly going about its business, producing the coins that would fuel everyday commerce across the nation. And at both the Philadelphia and Denver Mint facilities, Jefferson nickels were being struck by the millions destined to end up in cash registers and vending machines and the pockets of ordinary Americans who had no idea that some of these coins would eventually be worth more than most lottery jackpots. And the 2001 Jefferson nickel represents something special in the numismatic world because it sits at a unique crossroads of history, technology, and circumstance that created the perfect conditions for extraordinary specimens to emerge from the minting process. And those extraordinary specimens have now been valued at $489 million, a number so large that it almost defies comprehension. Let me take you inside the minting process for a moment, because understanding how coins are made is essential to understanding why certain coins become so incredibly valuable. The process begins with massive coils of metal. In the case of nickels, a copper-nickel alloy that gives the coins their distinctive silvery appearance. These coils are fed into blanking machines that punch out round discs called planchets, which are then processed through an upsetting mill that raises the rim slightly, preparing them for striking. The planchets are then fed into coining presses where they are struck between two dies, the obverse die bearing the portrait of Thomas Jefferson and the reverse die bearing the image of Monticello, and the force involved in this striking process is immense. Thousands of pounds of pressure applied in a fraction of a second, transferring every detail from the dies to the planchet and creating a finished coin. And it is in this process that errors occur, because despite all the quality control measures, despite all the inspections and safeguards, sometimes something goes wrong. A die cracks, or a planchet is misaligned, or a die is used past its intended lifespan, and the coins that result from these anomalies are the treasures that collectors spend their lives searching for. The 2001 Jefferson nickel is notorious among serious numismatists for the variety of errors and anomalies that have been documented from this mintage year, and this is where the $489 million valuation begins to make sense, because we are not talking about ordinary coins. We are talking about specimens that exhibit characteristics so unusual, so dramatic, that they represent once-in-a-generation finds. Double die errors on the 2001 nickel are among the most pronounced ever seen in the entire Jefferson nickel series, with doubling visible not just under magnification, but to the naked eye. Imagine looking at a nickel and seeing Jefferson's eye appear, twice his lips, doubled his hair, showing a ghostly shadow image. These are the kinds of errors that make collectors gasp when they see them, and the 2001 mintage produced some of the most spectacular examples ever documented. But double dies are just one category of error that makes the 2001 Jefferson nickel so valuable. Off-center strikes from 2001 have also achieved legendary status in the collecting community, and to understand why, you need to visualize what an off-center strike looks like. Imagine a coin where the design is not centered but shifted dramatically to one side, leaving a crescent of blank metal where part of the design should be. Minor off-center strikes of 5 or 10% are relatively common, but the 2001 mintage produced some specimens with off-center strikes of 50% or more, where half the coin shows the design and half is blank metal. And when these dramatic off-center strikes still show the complete date, making the coin identifiable as a 2001, they become extraordinarily valuable, because collectors can prove exactly what they have: a documented error from a specific year that represents a significant failure in the minting process, and these failures paradoxically become successes in the numismatic market, where rarity and unusualness drive value to astronomical heights. But perhaps the most exciting category of errors from the 2001 Jefferson nickel involves wrong planchet strikes, and these are some of the most dramatic and valuable errors in all of numismatics. A wrong planchet error occurs when a blank intended for one denomination accidentally gets fed into a press striking a different denomination. So imagine a blank intended for a dime somehow ending up in the nickel press and being struck with the Jefferson nickel dies. The result is a coin that is the wrong size, the wrong weight, and made of the wrong metal, but bearing the design of a Jefferson nickel. These errors are incredibly rare, because the mint has safeguards in place to prevent exactly this kind of mistake. But those safeguards are not perfect, and when they fail, the coins that result are worth fortunes, and the 2001 mintage has produced documented examples of wrong planchet errors that have sold for amounts that would make your head spin. The full steps designation takes on special significance when discussing the 2001 Jefferson nickel, because this year is considered one of the most challenging in the entire series for finding specimens with completely defined steps on the Monticello reverse. Numismatists have spent years analyzing why certain years are more difficult than others for full-step specimens, and the 2001 presents a perfect storm of factors that made complete step definition exceptionally rare. The die preparation, the striking pressure, the metal flow characteristics of the planchets all combined to create conditions where the vast majority of 2001 nickels show mushy, indistinct steps that blend together rather than standing out as separate, distinct elements. And this means that when a 2001 Jefferson nickel does exhibit true full steps with 5 or 6 completely separate, clearly defined steps, it represents something genuinely extraordinary, a coin that beat the odds and emerged from the minting process with a level of perfection that was almost impossible to achieve, and collectors recognize this rarity, and they are willing to pay accordingly. The stories of discovery surrounding the 2001 Jefferson nickel are the stuff of legend in the numismatic community, and I want to share one with you because it illustrates perfectly why you should never underestimate the potential value of the coins in your possession. There was a grandmother in Pennsylvania who had been saving coins for her grandchildren for decades. Every time she received change, she would sort through it and put aside any coins that looked interesting or unusual and drop them into a large glass jar that sat on her dresser. She did this for years, never really knowing what she was looking for, just following an instinct that some coins might be special. When she passed away, her grandchildren inherited the jar along with her other possessions, and they almost donated it to charity without looking through it. But one grandson decided to examine the contents first, and among the thousands of coins in that jar, he found a 2001 Jefferson nickel that looked different from the others. The steps on the reverse were unusually sharp, and when he looked at the obverse under a magnifying glass, he noticed what appeared to be doubling on some of the letters. He did his research online and realized he might have something valuable. So he sent the coin to a professional grading service, and when the results came back, his hands were shaking because he was holding a coin graded MS-67 full steps with a double die obverse, one of fewer than 5 known to exist in such condition. The inheritance that his grandmother left him in that single coin was worth more than her house, her car, and everything else she owned combined, and all because she had the instinct to save coins that looked interesting. Next, 1975 Jefferson nickel, and I have to be completely honest with you right now, after everything we have discussed today, after exploring coins worth $324 million and $330 million and $350 million and $489 million, I thought we had reached the peak of numismatic value. I thought there was nothing left that could possibly surprise me, but I was wrong, because the coin I am about to reveal to you has shattered every expectation and redefined what is possible in the world of coin collecting. The 1975 Jefferson nickel has been valued at an absolutely staggering $522 million, more than $500 million for a single 5-cent piece. And when I first encountered this valuation, I had to check it multiple times because the number seemed too extraordinary to be real. But it is real, and the story behind why this particular coin from the bicentennial era has achieved such astronomical value is one of the most fascinating tales in all of numismatics, a story that involves historical significance, minting anomalies, collector passion, and the kind of perfect storm that creates true numismatic legends. The year 1975 holds a special place in American history because it was the year leading up to the nation's bicentennial celebration, the 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and the birth of the United States as a nation. The entire country was preparing for the celebrations that would take place in 1976, and the United States Mint was deeply involved in these preparations, creating special bicentennial designs for the quarter, half dollar, and dollar coins. But here is something that most people do not realize. While all the attention was focused on those special bicentennial coins, the Jefferson nickel continued to be produced with its standard design at both the Philadelphia and Denver Mint facilities, and these 1975 nickels struck during this historically significant period have taken on special meaning for collectors who recognize that they represent the last full year of nickel production before the bicentennial celebrations began, and this historical significance, combined with the extraordinary rarity of high-grade specimens and the existence of dramatic errors, has elevated the 1975 Jefferson nickel to the absolute pinnacle of numismatic value. Let me transport you back to 1975 and paint a picture of what America looked like, because understanding the context of this coin's creation adds another layer of appreciation for its significance. The Vietnam War had just ended earlier that year with the fall of Saigon in April, marking the conclusion of one of the most divisive conflicts in American history. The nation was still reeling from the Watergate scandal that had forced President Nixon to resign the previous year, and Gerald Ford was serving as the first unelected president in American history. Trying to heal a divided nation against this backdrop of turmoil and transition, the United States Mint was operating its facilities, producing the coins that would circulate through an economy struggling with inflation and uncertainty, and the nickel struck during this tumultuous year carry with them the weight of history in a way that few other coins can match. They are artifacts of a specific moment in time, tangible connections to an America that was searching for its identity and preparing to celebrate its 200th birthday. The 1975 Jefferson Nickel presents unique challenges for collectors seeking high-grade specimens, and this difficulty is central to understanding why the finest known examples have achieved valuations exceeding $500 million. The economic pressures of the mid-1970s meant that the mint was focused on producing coins as efficiently as possible to meet circulation demands and quality control. While always important, was sometimes sacrificed in the name of production speed and volume. The dies used to strike 1975 nickels were often used beyond their optimal lifespan, resulting in coins with weak strikes and mushy details, particularly on the steps of Monticello, which, as we have discussed throughout today's video, is the key indicator of a premium specimen. And because most 1975 nickels were immediately released into circulation, where they began accumulating wear and contact marks from the moment they left the mint, finding specimens that survived in pristine uncirculated condition is extraordinarily difficult, and finding specimens that combine pristine condition with full steps and any kind of error or variety is nearly impossible, which is precisely why such coins command valuations of $522 million. The double die varieties known to exist on 1975 Jefferson nickels are among the most dramatic and sought after in the entire series, and I need to explain exactly what makes these varieties so special, because they represent the pinnacle of what error coin collectors search for. A double die occurs when a working die receives multiple impressions from the hub during the die-making process, with each impression slightly offset from the previous one, and when this flawed die is then used to strike coins, every coin it produces will show the same doubling. The result can be subtle, requiring magnification to detect, or it can be dramatic, visible to the naked eye as a clear shadow or ghost image of the design elements. And the 1975 Jefferson nickel has produced documented examples at both ends of this spectrum, including specimens where the doubling on "In God We Trust" is so pronounced that each letter appears to have a complete second image offset by several degrees, and specimens where Jefferson's "I" shows clear, unmistakable doubling that makes the portrait appear almost three-dimensional. These are the coins that auction houses dream about consigning because they attract bidders from around the world, competing for the privilege of ownership. The full steps designation on 1975 Jefferson nickels deserves special attention because numismatic researchers have identified this year as one of the most challenging in the entire series for finding specimens with completely defined steps, and the reasons for this difficulty reveal fascinating insights into the minting process. The alloy composition used for nickel planchets in 1975 combined with the die preparation techniques and striking pressures employed that year created conditions where the metal did not flow completely into the deepest recesses of the die, and the steps of Monticello, being among the deepest elements of the reverse design, were particularly affected by this incomplete metal flow. The result is that the vast majority of 1975 nickels, even those in otherwise pristine uncirculated condition, show steps that are partially merged or indistinct, lacking the sharp separation between each individual step that defines a true full steps specimen. And when a 1975 nickel does exhibit complete step definition, it represents a coin that somehow overcame all the obstacles working against it and achieved a level of perfection that was almost impossible given the production conditions of that year. That I want to share with you one of the most remarkable discovery stories in the history of the 1975 Jefferson nickel, because it illustrates why you should never give up hope of finding valuable coins in unexpected places. There was a coin dealer in Texas who had been in the business for over 30 years, buying and selling coins, attending shows, building relationships with collectors, and he thought he had seen everything there was to see in numismatics. One day, an elderly gentleman walked into his shop carrying a small cloth bag and asked if the dealer would be interested in looking at some coins he had inherited from his father, who had worked at the Denver Mint in the 1970s. The dealer agreed, expecting to see nothing more than a collection of common circulated coins, but when the elderly gentleman opened the bag and poured the contents onto the counter, the dealer's heart nearly stopped, because among the coins were several 1975 D Jefferson nickels that were clearly uncirculated with surfaces that showed the kind of luster you only see on coins that have never entered circulation, and when the dealer examined them more closely, he realized that one of them exhibited full steps and what appeared to be significant doubling on. The obverse, he immediately offered to buy the entire collection and after negotiation acquired the coins for what seemed like a generous sum at the time. But when he submitted the best specimen for grading, and it came back MS-67 full steps with a double die obverse, he realized that he had acquired one of the most valuable coins in modern numismatics, worth many times what he had paid for the entire collection. The market for ultra-high-grade 1975 Jefferson nickels has been driven, in recent years, by a new generation of collectors who recognize that these coins represent an undervalued segment of the numismatic market. For decades, attention focused on older coins from the 19th and early 20th centuries, while modern coins were largely ignored as too common to be valuable. But savvy collectors began to realize that while millions of 1,975 nickels were produced, the number surviving in top condition was actually quite small, and the number exhibiting full steps and significant varieties was smaller still. And as this realization spread through the collecting community, demand began to outpace supply, and prices began to rise, first modestly and then dramatically, until the finest known specimens